Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Serge, and welcome to another episode of Search for the Truth. And our goal is to empower people with knowledge, educate them so they can take in charge their health and reversing health problems naturally. And today I'm really excited to have my guest, Miss Kira. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm excited because you're a colleague of mine. I've been following you for a while, and we're going to talk about a really serious topic about autoimmune conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up doing what you do now?
Yeah, so I'll make a long story short. I suffered from chronic digestive issues from an early age. I mean, very early childhood. No one could ever figure out what was wrong with me. Different testing, different diagnosis, given the all-encompassing IBS because they didn't know what else to say. And it was in my 20s that I was really starting to get frustrated and just not understanding, why can't you help me? You're not giving me any answers. I still feel awful. And it was at that point that I was a middle school teacher and said, I'm just going to go back and get a nutrition degree to help myself because I'm starting to see that maybe food is part of my problem, and no one ever brought that up with me. So then fast forward a few years, I'm just finishing up my nutrition degree and my husband is diagnosed with 2 autoimmune disorders back to back. And at that point, the wheels started turning in my head and I said, okay, I know what to do with food, but why is your body failing overnight? It seems like there's got to be an underlying issue and the doctors are just telling you to take steroids. So then I became a little obsessed with functional medicine and now I'm here.
That's a good thing. We need more of you actually to help people. And your story is kind of fascinating because I had a similar journey. Medical doctors from I was about 8-9 years old to 20-25, no answers. And I had to do myself all the research and take in charge of my life. And the fascinating thing is you were able to help yourself with nutrition. So that gives a lot of hope to people because a lot of people are in that situation. They've done that medical route and nothing is helping. And these days, one of the trends that I see is it seems that most people are diagnosed with autoimmune, right? It seems to be the new umbrella. I mean, back in my day, it was fibromyalgia. It seems that everybody had fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
They didn't know what's going on, and now it seems to be autoimmune. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about what is autoimmune conditions and what do you think are the main factors or triggers of those chronic conditions?
So autoimmune, in the simplest way, is your immune system is on haywire. So a good example, Hashimoto's, because that's a very common one with women. I see that diagnosis more and more. People just assume my thyroid is not responding well. It must be hypothyroid, and that's kind of all they're told. But in reality, your thyroid's attacking itself. Just like fibromyalgia. I mean, the body system that's failing is what's attacking itself. With my husband, with autoimmune hepatitis, his liver was attacking itself. So the immune system has gone haywire. That's kind of the simplest way to put it for people without getting into the biochemical piece. But I do see triggers. And this is where people get confused and they'll say, well, I'm so different from that person. Well, yes, there's biochemical individuality, but I see 4 very common triggers with autoimmune disease. And this is where I feel like when people can focus on these 4, that's when healing happens. So first and foremost is the food piece, right? You've got to nail down the food. And we can dive into those more if you'd like. Infections is the second one, whether it's gut infections, some type of viral infection like Epstein-Barr that's triggered an autoimmune response. Exposures are another one, mold, Lyme, 2 very common ones that are often not explored by the mainstream medical community. And then trauma and emotions. A lot of times childhood trauma becomes a trigger later in life for autoimmune.
Good point. And I totally agree with those factors because this is exactly what I see too in my clinic. And let's talk about the first piece. To me, it seems to be the most important. Yeah. We are what we eat, right? What we put in our mouth, in our body. So tell us a bit about the diet, the foods to avoid, what we need to do exactly, because there's there's dozens of types of diets out there. People are confused. I was confused myself when I was in my teens. I didn't know what to do with diet.
Yeah.
But what do you see seem to be the best diet that works for most people?
It's funny because you're right. There's so many diets now. I'll have clients come to me and say, well, carnivore is the best diet. And then others say vegan. It's like, well, how do you sort through all that noise?
Exactly.
Two completely different conflicting
Yeah.
points of view. I think there's value to any of them. But I also think that the best diets follow very similar principles of opting for food in its most natural state. You know, if you can find it out in nature, whether it is an animal, if you eat animal products or fruits or vegetables or nuts or seeds, you're getting those in nature in the whole form versus things that are coming from a factory. You know, like this is where I think people get confused and they'll say, well, you know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to start eating a lot of meat. Okay, well, where's your meat sourcing coming from? Are you eating animals that have been injected with hormones and antibiotics? Same thing with your chickens. How were they raised? If you're eating a lot of nuts and seeds, were they sprayed with glyphosate? So I tell people, go for the most natural form of food, you know, one ingredient, ideally, that's it. And then look for things that are organic, non-GMO, grass-fed, things like that. That is the basic place to start, and that will probably get you the most bang for your buck rather than getting caught up in, well, do I do autoimmune paleo? Do I do Wall's protocol? Is vegan better? Is carnivore? Focus on natural foods.
I think I agree with you because I have witnessed people reversing like MS or those autoimmune issues with vegan, with carnivore, somewhere in between. And I think everything that was in common among those patients were the quality of the food, right? The toxins. Yeah. So we have one of our listeners, she made a comment. I'm going to put it on the screen. She has MS. So what can you tell her about MS? What can she do to help with that?
Start with the food piece. Start working towards a low inflammatory diet, and people often get confused by that. Don't get caught up in the term. You know, if you start Googling low inflammatory, it's like, well, is this food better than that one? Food in its most natural state. With any type of autoimmune diagnosis, I'm always suggesting to start with an elimination diet to see if there are triggers there. So gluten is the big one. So if you're consuming gluten, that needs to go. And then look at dairy, corn, soy, and eggs. Those can also be problematic. They're not issues for everyone, but it's a good place to start as a bit of trial and error and say, okay, I'm going to remove these foods, and then I'm going to very slowly reintroduce them one by one over the course of a week. See how I respond. Do I feel better when they're gone? Do I feel worse with something being back in? So that's probably the first place I would start. Yeah.
Good. Like you said, the elimination diet is wonderful. Like personally, that's kind of what I like from the carnivore diet is if you do the elimination diet from a carnivore point of view, you eliminate pretty much all the allergens and you add them back. So I really see a value from carnivore from that. I'm still debating with myself about the long-term diet when it comes to carnivore, but for a short time, it can be really beneficial. Yeah. And I put a comment at the bottom of the screen. I cannot really say what the comment says because I would be banned from YouTube. But what do you think about what that person said?
I think there's some merit to it. Yeah. Because I think, again, it goes back to that environment piece. You know, like the environment has been changing so much, not from that, but also from things being sprayed around. So I think it's a good possibility. Obviously, I can't say for sure if that's the only reason.
I agree with you. Sometimes there's a component, something has nothing to do with that. And then you mentioned exposure, which at the end of the day is toxins we are exposed to. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit about toxins? Okay, what do we need to do? Because every day we ingest, we breathe toxins, we drink toxins. So it seems that we are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So what do we need to do when it comes to toxin? Do we need to detox or cleansing? So what do you do clinically with your patients?
Yeah, so again, I start with the basics because it's overwhelming. I mean, you start talking detox and it's like, well, literally everything around me is a toxin pretty much. So looking at the environment directly around you, right? So are you using a ton of bleach and pine sol and these highly toxic cleaning products in your house? If you are, that is a very easy step. Start looking at environmental working group, post in different groups, ask people, but there are plenty of non-toxic cleaning products out there. Look at the things that you're slathering on your body, right? That's another organ right there where it's just like going right into your mouth, but there's no liver filtration in that regard. So if you're, again, slathering your body in lots of different body lotions and spraying on perfumes for my females, probably not the best. Start looking for non-toxic options. If you work out of the home, one of the best things you can do is open windows. I mean, when the season's appropriate, of course, it's like 115 here. But whenever I'm able to, I will open all the windows in the house and let the air go out, because furniture is off-gassing. I don't know what, things were used to paint these walls before I moved in. I have some carpet upstairs, unfortunately. So there are a ton of things, but keep it simple. Opt for, the best food sources like we spoke about. Look at your cleaning products, your beauty products, air out your house. Get some houseplants. That's another great one. Yeah. And then in terms of detox, it varies from person to person. There's a lot of marketing gimmicks out there, I'm sure you know.
I'm glad you brought it up. That was kind of my questions, because people go crazy with detoxing. And I had a guy who came to me, actually, he did one of those detox that he bought at the store, and he ended up in the ER, and they wanted to do a kidney transplant on him because his kidneys were shot. And they came to me and said, listen, I think you just detox, you use the wrong products. So I think at the end of the day, people need to be really, really careful when it comes to detoxing. Yeah. And Miss Gwen Barber has a really fascinating story. I'm going to put it on the screen. So she was diagnosed with RA almost 20 years ago, and she was allergic to chicken. Got up chicken, no more RA. Is that fascinating?
Crazy.
You would believe that chicken would be good for you, right? But most poultry that we buy in this country is not quite healthy. Yeah, unfortunately. So I'm glad, Gwen, you're doing better. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And milk thistle. Yeah, milk thistle is a good detox, right? You can use it. I guess, again, it depends on the source. It depends on how clean it is.
How many milligrams, how long you're taking it. Because I was reading something fascinating saying that that's actually impairing phase 3 detoxification.
Yes. Me, personally, I don't use milk thistle much because it doesn't do the job that I want to do the job with my clients. And Mr. David has a really good comment. TBHQ is banned more allergies. It is pretty toxic, actually. You have a really good point, David. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. And I think the few things that people can do to minimize exposures make sense, right? It's so simple, actually. And sometimes people go too crazy and too complicated about detoxing.
Yeah, or like you said, they'll go for a magic supplement that someone said, this is great for detox. But if you're slathering yourself in stuff and cleaning, like I said, with Pine salt, it's not going to make a difference.
It won't, exactly. It can actually overwhelm your pathways. Yeah, it's crazy. So we talk about the food, we talk about the toxins, and then the next part is the gut, right? Specifically the microbes. So can you tell us a bit about the gut? Because most people know that the immune system is located in our gut. Mm-hmm. I think there's a direct connection with autoimmune and gut function. Yeah.
So gut, people ask me, what is that? Is that just my stomach? I mean, honestly, it's from your mouth through your colon. It's pretty much all of the digestive organs in between. And it houses about 70% or more of our immune system. I think they're a little unsure of that. And I mean, think about the amount of bacteria in that whole area. It's far more than the cells that we have in our body, from what I understand. And it controls a lot. If bacteria is out of balance, you've got too much of one, not enough of another, some pathogens in there, that's going to lead to chaos in the body. There are autoimmune triggers that we can look at on certain stool tests. It's such a big connection. And I find that I'm not even going to say most, I'm going to say 100% of the women I've worked with autoimmune have stuff going on in the gastrointestinal tract. So it's so important to look at that and to be balancing out those levels. And again, not blindly supplementing and just saying, I read online that I'm supposed to take a probiotic and a prebiotic, so now I'm just going to start taking it every day, because you could be feeding the wrong bacteria.
I really like what you said, because again, when it comes to detoxing, people go crazy sometimes, and when it comes to the gut, people go crazy too. I mean, I had people taking probiotics and this and this. I mean, Dr. Google, sometimes it's good, but sometimes it can lead to so many confusion in people's mind. So many people can get hurt just taking those vitamins. So you really have to work with somebody like Kira to do what you actually need to do based on your own body's chemistry and situation.
Yeah, and even
Yeah, exactly.
people get excited about, I'm going to load up on sauerkraut, or I'm going to consume a ton of bone broth, and if they're having a histamine reaction, they're just making it worse.
Which I have seen too. I mean, again, as part of the diet, sometimes people do healing the gut, but it's not as simple as taking bone broth, taking fibers and this and this and this. It's a bit more complicated. So what's the most common pathogens that you see based on your assessments with women? Is it a fungal issue? Is it a bacterial overgrowth? Is it parasitic? Whatever.
I would say there's two very common things I see. One of them is yeast, candida, usually comes up on most women. And then the second one would be just an imbalance of bacteria, bacterial overgrowth. Dysbiosis would be the fancy term. Yeah.
So what do you do when it comes to fungals? Because it seems to be pandemic as well, right? People take the pill or take antibiotics and all those meds. So what would be the best, safest approach to help the body to get rid of the yeast, the fungal?
It's kind of twofold for me. So first, again, going back to the diet piece, if you're consuming a lot of sugar, I don't care what kind of herbals we're throwing at it, the yeast is just going to remain there or come right back. So got to cut out all the sugars, the high starchy things that we tend to love. That's the first thing. The second thing is kind of evaluating, and this is where the digging comes in for you and I. Why do you have candida overgrowth? You know, is it there's a safety mechanism because you have a ton of amalgam fillings and it's there to block the mercury? Were you exposed to a water, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a water damaged building, and maybe you've got some mold and that's why it's recurring. So it's starting with the diet, but it's also digging into, why do you think you have candida? Is there something else that's an underlying issue for that?
I really like what you said about the feelings, because that seems to be a connection with a lot of autoimmune issues, right? I mean, back in the days, they believe, I mean, if I'm not wrong, they still use mercury for feelings in most places. They still believe it's safe. But my understanding of feeling is they do leak mercury and different metals, right? And I think it goes into the gut.
And a big problem, I think even the bigger problem I see, is that people will go to the dentist to get them removed because, again, someone online or Google said, you know, that mercury is not safe. And they're like, I got to get it out of my body. I'm just going to go to the dentist and get it removed. And they are not trained in removing it. Like a regular dentist is not trained. And I know that sounds crazy to many people. They're like, well, it's a dentist, they put it in. But if they're not wearing the proper PPE and taking the right precautions and getting the ventilation, all of that's just going back into your body, up into the brain, and you've just created more chaos.
You're right. Actually, it happened to one of my patients. She read online, she went to the dentist, and she lost the vision in one eye because of the mercury vapor. And she didn't know about it. When she came to me, she said, can we detox? Can we do something? We can do a lot. I'm not trying to scare people off, but you really have to be careful when it comes to your health and your teeth. Your teeth is so important. We can get into that maybe another day, but that's so important to deal with mercury. I mean, there's many sources of mercury, right? Mm-hmm. It's a tough metal to move. You have to be really careful to detox that.
Yeah.
And we have a listener, Marita. She says, I used to have IBS, then colitis. What diet should I follow?
And then you were diagnosed with C. diff. Again, it's really going to depend on the individual. This is where it gets tricky. You know, I wish I could just say this is the right diet for that condition, but it depends on other symptoms that might be happening in the body. It might depend on some lab work, you know, if you're deficient in certain things. And it depends on even your interests, right? Like if I say right now, I think vegan's the best, and you're like, I don't eat vegetables, that's probably not going to be the best diet. So again, I hate to fall back on that, but I'm going to say just opting for things coming from nature as much as possible, highest quality, whether it's animal products, plants, going for organic, and then getting that gluten out if you haven't already.
Good point. And we have Miss Susan here. She says, I'm using D-mannose for UTI issues. There's quite a decent amount of women who have chronic UTIs. So is D-mannose good? And UTIs, why people get UTIs like some people get like fairly regularly? Is it a gut issue again?
Yeah, it can be a gut issue. A lot of times there's a connection with candida or yeast overgrowth. Definitely an imbalance, but D-mannose is a good one.
Good. And you're right? Pretty much everything connects to the gut.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So what can you tell us about the pattern that I see, at least in Houston, is it seems that more women than men are diagnosed with autoimmune conditions. Mm-hmm. Is there a hormonal component to those conditions?
I would say absolutely. Because again, the things that we're exposed to in our environment are factors in that. Xenoestrogens, that's a whole other topic as well. But yes, men have circulating hormones, but I feel like they're not as intricate as women's with the whole dance of estrogen and progesterone, which can be problematic. And that excess estrogen is a big component with autoimmune. That's another thing when I'm running a hormone panel on my women that I work with. Most have some pretty significant estrogen dominance. Not all, but most.
Can you tell us a bit more about the xenoestrogen? Because this is, to me, really important when it comes to women's health.
Yeah, it's the environment piece again. So xenoestrogens are essentially just estrogen mimicking chemicals. So they can almost force the body to create more estrogen. So beauty products, cleaning products, again, that are highly toxic would be xenoestrogens. Plastic, whether you're using plastic to cook in, which I hope nobody is, but I still see it, or even storing in plastics, drinking out of plastic water bottles. Those are kind of the biggest sources. But then again, animal products, if they're pumped full of hormones, antibiotics, those are going to be xenoestrogens as well. And those are all, like I said, raising your estrogen levels. And with stress, the way it's been for many people, especially the last 2 years, that's going to push down progesterone, creating that imbalance. And that's where women start complaining of weight gain and other issues.
Correct. Yes. And I believe one of the most popular, not really popular, common xenoestrogen was BPA back in the days, right? Yeah. We talk a lot about it in plastics. I believe, if I remember correctly, they use BPS or another type of plastic chemicals to replace the BPA, which is even more toxic to me. Yeah. It's ridiculous. At the end of the day, like you said, I think we need to avoid plastic as much as we can. Yeah. So how can we detox that? Because an excess of estrogen, it's not so healthy for your body. It can mess up your thyroid, your adrenals, your gut, your immune system. So is there a way to safely normalize your levels?
Yeah, again, it's going to depend on the individual, but cutting out those xenoestrogens is the first step. Getting them out of there. Maximizing stress reduction techniques so that if you're a menstruating woman, progesterone can start to fluctuate. If you're postmenopausal, I'm sorry, there's not going to be any fluctuation there. And then there are certain foods that have been shown to help with estrogen. Ground flaxseed is a xeno, or you know what I'm looking for, not xenoestrogen.
The
estrogen.
Yeah.
Which can help with levels there. Cruciferous vegetables have some components that are shown to help lower estrogen levels. And then again, looking at the broader picture of, is there something going on in the gut? Are you even able to flush out that excess estrogen? Because this is another one that we won't get too big into this. But if you're not using the restroom on a daily basis, I'll say that in a delicate way, yes. Women, you cannot flush out that excess estrogen. So if you're somebody that's going 3 times a week and you're trying to detox this estrogen, it's just recirculating back into your body.
I don't remember the exact number, but it was a decent amount of the population that do have constipation,
yep.
Low bowel movement. It's more common what people think. Yep. I mean, one time I had this new client who came to me and asked, "Are you regular?" "Oh yeah, I'm regular once a week, every Sunday." It's like, oh, that's not what I meant. So I had to explain to her that that was not quite normal. But sometimes people don't know what being regular or normal bowels are.
Yeah, they're like, that's normal to me. It's been that way my life. I don't even ask anymore. Are you using the restroom 1 to 3 times a day?
Yes.
To be specific.
Exactly. I learned from that woman for sure.
Same.
So we didn't talk about the last component, which is more the emotional, psychological, the trauma piece. So can you cover a little bit this and the connection with autoimmune?
Yeah. So, I mean, first we can start with childhood trauma. There's something called adverse childhood events, ACEs. We know now from studies that children that had some adverse events happen to them are much more likely to develop an autoimmune condition later in life. So if you're not familiar with the ACEs study or what your ACEs score might be, Google it and you'll find an ACEs quiz, I guarantee it. The other piece of that is women. We've got some research supporting this. Women that do not have good self-care routines or coping mechanisms. So these are the women that might be not even type A, but let me take care of my husband. Let me take care of the kids. I'm not going to focus on myself. They're more likely to develop autoimmune. And then we've got the emotional component and just general trauma, things that are happening to us every day, which are causing the nervous system to just be overwhelmed, putting you in fight or flight mode, and you're much more likely to develop some type of an autoimmune disorder because the immune system just does not know how to respond.
I don't know how many times I have witnessed that with people. They had a death in the family or diagnosis of cancer or car accident, whatever trauma. And it seemed that overnight, the body just collapsed and they were diagnosed with a chronic issues that should have taken years and years and years to actually get to that point. So the mind can be really powerful in both ways.
Yep. Very, very powerful. And then even looking, this is one thing I work with my clients on is, what are your emotions? What are your thoughts on a daily basis? If you're constantly in a negative state and just focused on how poorly you feel, you're just going to bring more of that into your life.
So how do you handle that with people? What do you do to help them with the emotional component?
I mean, I'm not a therapist, so let me throw that out there. If someone needs a referral, they need a referral. But we can at least start with just recognizing patterns and habits in their own life and taking it from there. So like I said, it might literally be just spending a day, if someone's really not self-aware of what are your thoughts that are going in your mind throughout the day, because we have thousands of them. If they're more negative, what can we do? What types of things can we do to create more joy in your life or to get you to have more positive self-talk? So it's those little things. I see ACE test. Yes, adverse childhood events. ACEs quiz, ACEs test is probably how you'll find it.
Thank you. That was really helpful for her. So our time is up, but I would like to end on a positive note. Can you tell us about a patient? Then when she or he came to you, you were not quite sure about how to help, chronic issues, really bad shape. And then you help that person and she has her life back now. Really a good case that you had.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking of a client who came to me with chronic digestive issues herself. And she had always suspected colitis or Crohn's, but had never gotten a diagnosis. Was just struggling to get some testing and to get people to listen to her. And when she came to me, it was funny. It's like she was excited to work with me, but at the same time, her first phrase to me when I asked, what are you hoping for? She said, well, I'm kind of resorted that I'm going to live like this forever, but I want to see if there's another option. So she had been struggling. And I mean, when I say chronic digestive issues, this is someone who was running to the restroom anywhere from 5 to 10 times every single day.
Wow.
Had lots of pain multiple times per week. So obviously, stool test, got to look at what's going on in the gut. And we just started kind of unweaving this web. And after 3 months of working together, I think she was having pain every other week. And she was running to the restroom maybe once a week. And then at the 6-month mark, then we were looking at more like an issue every month. So I think that's actually important for people to see. They're expecting like in 3 months, she was completely healed. It's a journey and it is a process, but she kept fighting and kept getting results and was getting better.
This is exciting, and that gives a lot of hope to people. And you have a good point, is a lot of people expect the quick magic pill, right? But when it comes to your work, functional medicine, natural healing, it's a process. And like you said, it's a journey. And I tell people, it's not the destination that matters, to really keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And it's for life. I mean, when you do that kind of work, you eat clean for the rest of your life, and you feel better, better, and better.
Yep. Yeah.
So how can people reach out to you if they have any questions or if they want to work with you?
Yeah. So my business name is A Nourished Life. So you can find me on Facebook at A Nourished Life Nutrition, Instagram, A Nourished Life Nutrition, and then my website is simply anourished.lifenutrition.com.
Okay, that's simple. So you guys, if you have any questions for her, or if you're dealing with chronic conditions, she's the one to go. So reach out to her. So thank you, Kira, for your time. I really appreciate it. And you guys have a good day. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.